Once again, it's on. You know what time it is. It's time to play some toss. Welcome, everyone, to episode 93. The grave digger Gilbert Brown would be so proud. Episode 93 of the Tristain Sports Show Toss. It is your main man, your friendly neighborhood T-Square, Tristan Thomas. Thank you all so very much for joining us this week. What do we got on tap? Preseason is over for the Green Bay Packers. Final cuts have occurred. We'll discuss how does that roster look? How does the practice squad roster look? And a trade was made. We'll discuss further. And then the toss sweep, we have a whole mixed bag from the NBA to the NFL and to a program that's really not a program getting on national TV. Y'all know what I'm talking about, but you didn't hear it from me. We'll discuss that as well. But you all know how we get things started here on Toss. We get things started with the state of the state, and let's get to the Green Bay Packers. We'll get to the Milwaukee Brewers as well as the Milwaukee Bucks next week. We're getting back into that every week swing. Football season is about to start up. NBA will be back in training camp soon. The MLB is getting closer to playoffs. The WNBA is getting close to playoffs. College football is returning. There's a lot to discuss. But before I get to those Green Bay Packers, I want to say this. New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a lot of small towns, they got hit really hard by Hurricane Ida. And if you are of means, please donate to organizations that are in that area. I have people down there, and it is a really bad situation. They were not able to get out. Flooding happening. Over 1 million people without power, without water. A lot of roads are closed, only open to emergency vehicles only while they work to restore power and get things cleaned up. It's a really bad situation in a lot of places. So again, if you're able, donate to organizations that are in the area. Those people need help. Praying for y'all. Doing what we can over here at Toss Nation Media. Hoping you stay strong. You make it through this. And come out stronger. But as I said before, we get things started with the state of the state. And we'll get to the Green Bay Packers. And their preseason is over. An 0-3 preseason, if you're keeping score at home. I honestly have told you before on this program for many years that I really don't care what the preseason record is. What I care about is what I see on the field. How has this team improved? Now, we really didn't see very many of the starters, especially the offensive starters. So you really can't judge what they're going to be like, right? But what you can judge are backups and players that, you know, like I said, we didn't see very many of the starters, but we did get to see guys like A.J. Dillon, who likely will share the backfield with not A.J. Green, but with, yeah, why am I talking about A.J. Green? Probably because I had fantasy drafts and I'm looking at a lot of Cardinals information that did those two drafts. I can't believe I always got that name mixed up. But, more than likely, he'll be sharing the field with Aaron Jones. And talk about AJ, that's who I'm talking about, number 33. But he won't be the starter. Jones will be. He is a dynamic back. But I love what AJ the Sauce Dillon, and that's what I'm talking about, AJ. You got two AJs back there. AJ the Sauce Dillon will bring to the table. You know, like I said, he's a bowling ball full of butcher knives. And when it gets time, in the wintertime, talk about November, December, especially at Lambeau, and now it's an 18-game season, longer season, cold weather. You don't want to see that man coming through the hole. You don't want to tackle him. This is going to be a whole lot of business decisions being made. But he's going to be good. He's going to be dynamic. We got to see a little bit of him. We got to see a little bit of Kylan Hill, who actually made the roster. We'll go through all those guys who got cut from the roster and made the roster and et cetera in a little bit. What did I see preseason? A lot of sloppiness, things that just need to be fixed. Now, the big thing was everybody was looking at Jordan Love. What had you seen from him? Well, he made some really good decisions and he made some really bad decisions. Overall, he took a step forward, but there's a lot of growth to be had there. A lot of growth to be had there. And you just hope that he has time to continue to grow. The Packers obviously drafted him. They traded back up into the first round to go and get him. So, if you trade back up to go and get a quarterback, you're not expecting him to sit for very long. Kind of muddies the waters of the Aaron Rodgers situation, but that's another story for another day. He took steps forward, but he's very much a young quarterback in the league. He made some throws that were amazing, and he made some decisions that weren't so amazing. Par for the course, right? Especially for a young quarterback. But the Packers decided to whittle down their roster. They had until Wednesday to do so, as we record this program on a Wednesday. The list of cuts made by the Green Bay Packers. And there were some names on there that you were kind of disappointed by. There was a name on there that you were absolutely shocked by. But most of these guys I felt were probably going to get cut, but there were a couple of guys who I felt did enough to garner a flat-out roster spot. The cuts go as follows. Defensive lineman Abdullah Anderson, wide receiver Reggie Begelton, who I thought would make it, but that last wide receiver spot was hotly contested. It could have gone either way between Malik Taylor and Reggie Begelton. It really could have, but I think Taylor did enough to make it. I thought Begelton did enough to make it, but there's only so many spots for so many guys. You're not going to carry 7 wide receivers, so Malik Taylor it was. Reggie Begelton got cut. Kurt Benkert, who I thought did enough to make the roster. I thought they should have carried 3 quarterbacks, but the Green Bay Packers made a different decision. I thought he did enough to make the roster flat out. Had a pretty good preseason. Again, a guy who made some really good decisions, some good throws, and made some not so good decisions. Guard tackle Jacob Capra. Guard tackle Coy Cronk. Cornerback Stephen Denmark. Kabian Into. Rogesterman Ferris. Ennis Gaines. Tipa Nalele. Dejon Harris. Damon Hazelton, wide receiver. Bronson Kafusi. Defensive lineman Carlo Kemp. The kicker J.J. Molson, who actually pushed Mason Crosby. That was a really good kicking contest between those two. There's whispers that this may be the quote-unquote last dance for Mason Crosby because, again, he did get pushed by Molson. Defensive lineman, Wellington Pavilion. Linebacker, Delonte Scott. A shocker, punter J.K. Scott. Now, J.K. Scott has had his issues with consistency. That's been well documented. But I thought he would squeak by and get on the roster, and he did not, which prompted a trade by the Green Bay Packers to go and get a punter, a guy who was kicking for the Rams in the preseason. A lot of people felt that he pushed their punter over there, felt that he did enough over there, and Johnny Hecker. And Hecker, no pun intended, is a heck of a kicker. He's a heck of a punter. He's got a leg on him. If you're pushing that guy, there's got to be something to you. Packers thought so. They brought him in. He's now the punter. Equinemius St. Brown. A lot of people were kind of shocked by that one, but I was not because at the end of the day, a player's best ability is availability. And he has the talent, but he just hasn't had the health, which means he hasn't had the availability, and that is ultimately what got him cut. Running back Patrick Taylor, safety Christian Uphoff, tackle guard Cole Van Lannon, Wisconsin's own, was cut. A lot of people, that was more of an emotional reaction. People didn't like that one. Linebacker Ray Wilborn, running back Dexter Williams, just really couldn't crack the lineup and stay within it. And wide receiver Juwan Winfrey, a guy that does have some talent, but just really couldn't put it all together, especially enough to make the roster. Now, all those cuts have been made. The Packers had their plan. Hey, we have to cut these guys. They're not going to make the roster, the 53-man roster. But we hope they clear waivers so we can put these guys on the practice squad. Now, because of COVID, they've expanded the practice squad again this season, which is a great move. Great move, which offers more opportunity for guys. So a lot of those names, Packers were hoping would clear waivers so they could stash them on their practice squad. And they announced their practice squad today. The practice squad goes as follows. Quarterback Kurt Benkert coming back. Wide receiver Juwan Winfrey coming back. Wide receiver Chris Blair. Wide receiver Equimenius St. Brown back on practice squad. So, again, they believe in those guys. They see those guys have some talent. They stash them on the practice squad. Tight end Bronson Kafusi makes the practice squad. Running back B. Taylor. Guard Ben Braden. Cole Van Lannon makes the practice squad. So a lot of people emotional over him getting cut. He clears waivers, comes back to the Packers practice squad. Jacob Capra makes the practice squad. Tipa Galele makes the practice squad. Ray Wilborn, Wilson Pavilion, Anderson, Into, Ennis Gaines, and kicker J.J. Molson. Again, a guy who pushed Mason Crosby. They thought of him enough to bring all those guys back to the practice squad. Really good practice squad, especially with COVID. If one of those guys, on the main roster has to sit games, as we saw with A.J. Dillon with COVID last year. Those we've seen a couple guys with close contacts, a couple of injuries here and there. They had to bring some of those guys up, and they came in and performed admirably. A lot of guys pushed some of those starters. A lot of those guys could have made the 53-man roster, but the Packers felt strongly about the guys that are on the 53. This is a championship team. This is a team right there on the cusp. They just have to find a way to get over the hump that is the NFC Championship game. They have to find a way for that defense to play the way that it has all season long. You talk about a top 10 defense last season, and I know it's a new season. But if they play like the top 10 defense, they move on to the Super Bowl. Now, there's no telling what happens in that Super Bowl. Chiefs are a damn good team. They're back again. They're again, with a damn good team again. There's no telling what happens in that Super Bowl. But I fully believe that defense gives up about 10 less points. Packers win that ball game. And I mean, it's easy to say that when you look at the score. Like, yeah, of course, 10 less points, they win the ball game. Of course they do. It's a completely different ball game. You're able to be a little bit more aggressive offensively, but you have to give it up to Tampa's defense. Excuse me, if they give up 13 less points and they win that ball game. But like I said, you guys know the point I'm trying to make. If the defense shows up, they win that ball game. Defense didn't really show up, so they lost that ball game. That's what I'm trying to say. Period. But I feel really good about this roster, and it's all about execution. You can feel good about any team on paper, but until you see what they do, until you see how they execute, until you see what kind of team they're going to be, what kind of health they have, what kind of performances they get out of guys, you just don't know. You're purely speculating. But for the last 2 seasons, this has been a final 2 team in the NFC. On the cusp of making the Super Bowl, on the cusp of winning a Super Bowl championship. That sort of team returns. There's motivation everywhere. But I think they did a really good job with this 53-man roster. I think this is a roster that can go out there, win a lot of ball games. Again, 18-game regular season. Still don't like it. Still doesn't roll off the tongue quite right. You're going to get a bunch of 9-9 teams and possibly I would be surprised if you find an 8-10 team winning the division, the NFC least. Not saying that's going to happen this year, but, they've been historically bad at doing that, sending under 500 teams to the playoffs or struggling to get over 500 and make it the playoffs. Now you got 18 games. You're going to see an 8-10 team make the playoffs as a division winner and have a home game. And it's not their fault that the division is bad, but again, I digress. It's an 18-game season. You got to get the absolute best out of these guys for 18 games, not just a regular 17. That's going to prove to be another challenge. But this team is highly motivated. They have the talent, despite what some lists out there are saying. Not even putting the Packers in the top 10 of having the most talented teams in the NFL, which is a crock. But again, I digress. They can win with this team and do a lot of great games, a lot of great things, win a lot of games. I'm excited to see what they do. We'll talk more about them next week. But now, it's time for us to run the toss sweep. The Toss Sweep, brought to you by the good folks at TossNationMedia.com. TossNationMedia.com, your home for the Toss brand of sports. Truthful, opinionated, passionate sports. It's what you deserve. As I mentioned in the teaser, Toss Sweep is a little bit of a mixed bag, hitting up many different subjects, because that's just what we do in the Toss Sweep. It's not just one thing, it's many. It's not just Wisconsin sports, it's everything. Let's head back to the NFL and talk about a surprising cut that happened. Probably the biggest name to have been cut. Cam Newton. Cam Newton, formerly of the New England Patriots, cut. Mac Jones, now the number one quarterback in New England. And look, and I said on the Toss Facebook page, that's facebook.com/T on Sports Show, that's TON Sports Show, that I was surprised. I knew this was a hotly contested quarterback competition, but I didn't know it was the, hey, cut a former NFL MVP quarterback type of competition. You know, bottom line, Cam left that door cracked open. Mac Jones went right through it. And it's interesting because he said, I think on a podcast earlier this year, that he felt that there wasn't 32 quarterbacks better than he is. Well, apparently the league right now is saying there's at least 64 that are better than you. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that I agree, but you have to kind of look at the regression of his play. Now, running the football, he's a big guy. He's hard to tackle. He's strong. Running the football, no problem. Reading defenses, I don't think that's much of a problem. I think Cam's a really smart guy. But his arm talent, if you remember when he came into the league as a rookie, he had a stretch of 400-plus yard throwing games. I believe he has the record for most passing yards in his first few games in the NFL. He was amazing. He was accurate. He's throwing the ball all over the yard, making every throw that you could possibly ask for, just answering every question that any critic had about his arm and his accuracy, and he answered those. And then it's like year by year, it kind of started to go down. And in his years with Carolina, with Riverboat Ron and that offense, they just abused his ability to run the football. They abused his size and his strength and just had him going there and, with the smash and dash, Williams and Stewart, those two running backs, and you add Cam Newton to that, they were a potent running attack. Nobody was stopping that running attack. They just fell in love with it and didn't want to do too much else. And it's like his arm talent regressed. And it's hard to explain because, like, how does someone's arm talent, how does it regress? I mean, I get it with age. We saw it with Drew Brees. His final season, he really couldn't throw the ball down the field the way that we were accustomed to seeing Drew Brees throw the ball down the field. Peyton Manning, very much the same thing. But this isn't a guy who's approaching 40. It's a guy in his early 30s. But even before his early 30s, it seemed like his arm talent regressed. And it's the craziest thing to me to see that. After how he came into the league and how he tossed the ball all over the yard, accurately, on time, able to read defenses, get the ball to receiver, let them make plays. And now it's like somewhere along the way, he lost that. And that's a big reason why he's no longer the Patriots quarterback. Oh, I mean, not even a backup. And I'm pretty sure that I don't think they didn't have a conversation about him being the backup. I don't think there was. I think the Patriots did everything they possibly could to keep him on that roster. But I just think Cam felt, especially after saying that on the podcast, I don't think there's 32 quarterbacks that are better than me. After saying that, I think they felt that there was no way he was going to go for a backup role. I think they may have discussed it with him. He probably declined, and they cut him outright so he could go and find a starting spot. Now, I'll say at this point, I don't think that he's going to find any starting spots. You're heading into the regular season, week one. Week one technically kicks off next Thursday. I'd say it doesn't kick off until next Sunday, when everybody is playing. Just doesn't really feel real. When you have one game, it's like, oh, it's NFL kickoff. The NFL season kicks off today. It just doesn't feel real to me until everybody is playing. The real week one starts that Sunday. Just my take on it. But at this point, he's not going to find a starting spot. If he's looking for that, he's going to have to wait for somebody to get injured, possibly have a need at that spot. Even then, he's probably going to have to come in as a backup because the backup's going to slide into the number one spot because they've been within that organization. They've been within that playbook. It's going to be hard for him to find a starting spot. He's going to have to be a backup. And again, I'm just purely speculating on whether or not the Patriots offered him a backup role. Was never offered any confirmation on that. That's something that they don't talk about. But you had to think that they had to have that conversation with him, and he just declined. But if they didn't have that conversation with him, wow, honestly, with the Patriots franchise, it wouldn't surprise me, but man. But that's probably the biggest cut for me. Now, there are teams who have shown interest. I'm hearing whispers of Philly. But again, it would be in a backup situation. And apparently the Dallas Cowboys, are doing their due diligence. Having him as a backup to Dak Prescott, who's coming off of injury. It's going to be interesting times for Cam Newton. It's a little bit too late to be getting a starting spot. Training camp's over. You don't really have time to dive into the playbook. Get acclimated to new teammates, new surroundings, new coaching staff, new playbook. It's going to be interesting to see where he lands. I still believe he will land somewhere. I don't foresee it being as a starter currently. Doesn't mean that it won't be. But he will end up on someone's roster. I can guarantee that. Let's move on to toss sweep and let's talk about Mike James. Mike James of the Brooklyn Nets, guy who annoyed Bucks fans during their semifinal series in the playoffs. Had that good game, but then he was really shut down the rest of the series. He had some an interesting thought lately. Came out on Twitter and basically said that Kyrie Irving, his teammate on Brooklyn, is top 3 most skilled basketball player in the history of the game. Top 3 in the history of the game, most skilled. Now, you could imagine that a lot of fans had their thoughts on that and made them known. And he's standing on what he said. And hey, credit to him. You can stand on it. And it is very subjective. But even with it being very subjective, you could still be wrong. How is he top 3 most skilled? And again, what skills are you counting? See, these days, everybody thinks that you got to have a bag. You know, a bag. Well, what is a bag? The fancy dribbling? That's your bag. All the fancy dribbles, the get the oohs and ahs. You know, the spin moves, oohs and ahs. That's the bag. Drawing cheap fouls, which is going to be cut down significantly with the rule changes in the NBA. So the Trae Youngs of the world and the James Hardens of the world, his teammate who rags on Giannis for not having a bag. You know, he ain't got to have a bag. He got a ring, something he don't. But I digress. Why are we so enamored with somebody having a quote unquote bag? And why are you mixing that with being most skilled? I mean, so what skills do you need to bring to the table in order to be the most skilled player? And not even the most skilled. He said he's top 3 all time. Now, don't get me wrong. I love me some Kyrie Irving. The man can shoot. Outstanding finisher at the rim. Good passer. High IQ for the game. Amazing handles. But what makes you best skilled? How's his footwork? Is it better than Kobe's? Is it better than Olajuwon's? Is it better than Shaq's? I don't think so. Does he get in there and rebound very well? I don't really think so. I mean, I get it. You could have very high regard and high thought for your teammate because you play against them in practice and you travel with them. You play alongside of them. So I get having very strong feelings about what your teammates are able to do. I get it. But when you talk about the pantheon of top 3 in the history of this game, not today, not top 3 today, top 3 in the history of the game, you got to bring a little bit more in the fancy dribbles. And I'm not saying that that's all Kyrie Irving brings to the table. But from the way that Mike James was talking about it, it just seemed like he thought a bag just meant the oohs and ahs and the fancy dribbles. Having a bag doesn't make you skilled. So I would need to have a conversation just to find out, okay, what constitutes skill to you? Because it's very subjective. What skills do you need in order to be in your top 3 most skilled of all time? Because that's a lot of praise for someone. You put them top 3. Who is his top 2? I didn't really look into that because I kind of looked at that. I was like, wait a minute, top 3 most skilled? Kyrie? Come on. And again, I love Kyrie. Love me some Kyrie Irving. But top 3 most skilled all time? Got to find out what makes them that way. Got to find out why he ranks so high on that list. Is it just recency bias? Is it, being close to him, not being able to see the forest amongst the trees? I don't know. But I thought that was very interesting, and so did a lot of people, because he just got the internet buzzing on that one. Last but not least, let's talk about the program that's not really a program, but was program enough to get on ESPN programming. Bishop Sycamore. This story had me laughing. So Bishop Sycamore football team, they duped ESPN into giving them a nationally televised ball game. But it didn't stop there. See, Bishop Sycamore had played the day before that nationally televised ball game. Then they get on that nationally televised ball game and they end up losing 58-0. And then it comes out that they're not a real team. So they somehow, some way lied. So they first somehow, some way got a hold of the right people within ESPN, then lied to them about the merits of their program. Show up, get shut out, destroyed, play their second game in 2 days. Crazy, number one. You can't play back-to-back football games, okay? This is like one of the most violent sports in all the world. And you're playing back-to-back games. That, number one, that's crazy. But number two, for ESPN to even allow a team on their air that had just played the day before is crazy. For them not to vet this team completely on the merits of their program is crazy. But the fact that it's not even a real football program and their coach got fired. Their coach got fired. It's crazy. How in the hell do you get fired from nothing? How do you get fired from nothing? I don't understand it. Like, I don't get it. I don't get it. How do you get fired from nothing? If anything, the coach should have kept his, and I'm doing air quotes here, been able to keep his job on the basis of, hey, we got this squad on ESPN. But at the same time, he should have been fired by the fact that he made them play back-to-back football games, with the second being on national television and getting embarrassed 58-0. With a bunch of people that have any business playing football in that particular division. It is the craziest thing. It is the craziest story. I cannot believe they got away with it. But then again, these days, if you know the right people and you can get a hold of the right people, because again, they said it's not what you know, it's who you know. So somebody knew somebody that knew somebody else that decided to give them some airways. And now that's somebody that knew somebody, that whole trail is probably going to get fired. And that I won't laugh about. But the very fact that this program played back-to-back games, with the second being on national television, and they're not even really a program. I'm sorry, y'all, but that gave me my laugh of the week. That gave me the heartiest laugh for the week. I still get a good chuckle out of it. But remember, the moral of the story is, if you got nothing, as long as you know somebody, you could get something. Well, y'all, that'll do it for me. That was episode 93 of the Tristain Sports Show Toss. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at the20double. That's at the number 2, the number 0, and the word double. The20double. Follow me. Instagram, Twitter. Facebook.com/TOnSports Show is your home for the Facebook page of Toss. We touch on a lot of things there that we don't necessarily get a chance to on the show, including Bishop Sycamore, but we did that here on the show as well. That's Facebook.com/TOnSports Show. That's TOnSports Show. And of course, TossNationMedia.com, your home for the Toss brand of sports. Truthful, opinionated, passionate sports. It's what you deserve. But as I said before, it's time for me to get on up out of here. T Squared, Tristain Thomas, reminding all of you to keep it moving forward. Always forward. Forward always. Until next week, so long from Toss.